When was the last time you guys practiced?
The last
I was
time.
there, or did you practice a couple more times?
No, it was when you were there. It was like, what was that? 2 weeks ago? Yeah.
Everyone there was really on edge for a second there.
Yeah.
About you.
Yeah.
You dropped your guitar on the floor asking about tape or glue.
Yeah. Yeah. They're.
But the tension of that kind of, I don't know, from the, I think 2 or 3 times I have been over there while you guys were practicing, the weird tension with that kind of, I don't know, I feel like it boosted it up a little bit more. I don't know, it just seemed a little more, you seemed a little more hostile. Well, not hostile, but within yourself, at least vocally wise, is where I'm kind of getting that at.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that was a good example of why it's perhaps a little difficult to work with me, because I'm unpredictable.
Unpredictable and has a strong vision.
Yeah, and sometimes my emotional state gets the best of me, and I come into practice basically ready to destroy. And usually they're not ready to meet that if that happens, because it's random. And that happens at shows too. That certainly happens a lot at shows, where like sometimes when we play it's a bit more calm, and then other times when we play it's like that, where it's you can almost feel the anger that's there. And so it kind of makes for an unpredictable experience overall, I think. Yeah. It's not intentional, it just happens.
Yeah. Well, then I guess that kind of gives into kind of that, not very stereotypical, but kind of, where music or art in general is very, very emotional driven.
Yeah, I think that a lot of what we do is very personal music, probably mainly to me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, every artist kind of has this personal attachment to what they're creating, and I think that when people forget that, then they lose the element of their music that keeps people interested.
What is your band? What is it called?
It's called Triage.
And where did you get the idea for that name?
It was Aiden's idea, actually.
And Aiden is
guitarist. Yeah. It started right around the time that Contra ended, so like late 2018. After Jaya died, I approached Aiden about a month after Jaya died, and told him I wanted to start a group where the direction was focused around creating a physically spiritual experience. And it was a vague description that basically at the time amounted to me torturing myself for applause, because when we started it wasn't in a very good place, really. I mean, we were overcoming Jaya's death, and I was drinking a lot, getting into a state where I would not really think about other people while we were doing it. Lots of barking commands at people. And so we were all kind of in this state all the time where we took the music very, very, very seriously, but we were all angry at each other all the time.
You're in this state of mourning, and you're trying to struggle for how to
Yeah, and
I
I
don't
mean,
necessarily get that out in simple terms, I guess, but
yeah, and I
just
mean,
struggling to cope with it together and get out the desire of how you do it in an artistic fashion.
yeah, and I didn't write every song on that album. I wrote half the album, and then the other half was Aiden and Ernie, our bassist, as you know. Because, I mean, Aiden was the closest one to Jai. He knew him his whole life.
Yeah.
And Ernie nearly died around the same time that Jaya died. And so Ernie's songs are kind of tapping into the same atmosphere that me and Aiden were coming from, except in a more direct way where he was kind of quite literally embracing death itself. And so all these events lined up to our first album, which I think kind of encapsulates a very unusual moment in the human life.
Yeah, which was called Payman.
Yes, Payman.
And kind of going back to Jaya's death from the previous group, Contra, you were kind of tapping into got some insight through some of the questions I didn't ask, but was his death and trying to form this new thing kind of this weird endless ladder to kind of climb up to find some coping mechanism or drive forward on how to just create without this person that you were so used to playing with most of the time?
I think that it was our emergency response to not knowing how to deal with losing a longtime band member who we relied heavily on. I mean, Contra, we admitted years before Jaya died that the only reason Contra could possibly exist was because of him. And he was the most important member of the group by a long shot. And so when he died, it kind of left us in this scenario of how can we possibly move forward? And fortunately, Aiden's little brother Shell was becoming a very competent drummer right around that point too. And so he's took on the role with great stride and has become once again the most important member of this group.
He is in fact one of the most glowing members of the group. Just the way he plays, he really kind of can't help but focus on his playing.
Yeah,
it's,
he's
one of the best I've seen. Even, looking on if you'd call professional musicians and what you see around locally, it's just one of the best ones I've seen.
Completely unique to our region. Anytime we play a show, people are usually in shock that someone as young as him is so able. He can do things that most drummers 20 years into their career can't do. And it's because he's just ritualistic about his practice. He practices every single day, at least for an hour every day, sometimes 2-3 hours.
And he works out, he does yoga and meditation.
He's in amazing
and whatnot,
shape, yeah.
So that's all gonna play into what he brings and how he focuses to playing.
And he's probably the most level-headed member of the group. Like, me and Ernie both are kind of like intense band leader types, the kind of people who are very specific about what they want and come to the table with something that they think is achievable, and then they have to go through the mess of making that thing happen, which is the hardest part of any strong artist career, where it's like, I have this thing, how do we make it into that thing? Or go beyond that even. And Shell's kind of like, he can take on any role in the band and deliver competence to it. He could be the guy who comes up with the ideas. He can be the guy who pitches ideas. He can be the guy who just listens, and he never really gets mad with that. He's content in any scenario, which I think is a sign of a strong musician.
Definitely, yeah. So, kind of coming to the transformation from Contra to Triage, dealing with Jaya and whatnot. Did the music or the motivation, did any of that kind of bring in kind of some kind of a spiritual journey for, I don't know, maybe meaning or trying to find something?
Do you mean like in the experience of like his death, or in the experience of creating music?
I think with his death, and also a little bit of that last part as well, kind of both.
Yeah, I think that before Jaya died, we were all pretty destructive people. We were all using crazy drugs and having problems, and nihilistic, angry young men who were flirting with death constantly with drugs and reckless behavior. And then after Jaya died, it became more of a, I don't know. I think that we all started to even out, get straight with ourselves, and have compassion for people, you know? Like, when we were all younger, we were all kind of intense and argumentative and challenging. And at least for myself, after he died, I kind of found myself feeling more compassion towards my fellow person and trying to level with people more. And in a sense, I got more interested in religions, not because I'm a religious person, but because the idea of death and afterlife is so intertwined with religion that it was kind of like necessary to maybe better understand these kinds of things rather than just denying them outright. And so it didn't show up so much on Payman because I started writing Payman before Jaya died. But the new album certainly takes on a lot of these aspects of life and death that are tied to religion and dogmas, social constructs, the reasons that we do certain things for an order or a deity. And so yeah, there is quite a bit of searching for meaning out of it, but I think it's in a greater way than like a spiritual reason. It's kind of like a personal reason. It's more about trying to find meaning for myself than it is about like the world around me. And Contra didn't do a lot of shows, and I didn't want to be one of those musicians who always wanted to be a musician who played lots of shows and lived off of his work. And the secret is you got to play a lot of shows. That's just the reality of American touring bands, is they have to play tons and tons and tons of shows to survive.
Absolutely.
And
a lot of
nobody in Contra had the gall to go out and actually get shows or record albums. We all just practiced endlessly, and that's not what I was doing with Triage. Triage was meant to be a band that had an audience that would come to shows, and we weren't just something like come over to my house and watch us practice like Contra was.
So with your audience and I mean, you guys play a very high volume, and
Yes.
I mean, because I'm experiencing that and whatnot, it's not a gesture to hurt you or be angry and aggressive, but I think kind of goes along with that kind of, you know, it's physical music. You have to feel it.
Yeah. The music that we make is very dynamic, and part of the problem that you encounter with dynamic music is that when you're playing something that's extremely quiet, when you're not playing at a loud volume, those very quiet parts end up being too quiet. And so it makes sense to play louder than a typical band when your quiet parts are as quiet as a typical band's quiet parts, and the loud parts are as loud as, you know, whatever beyond that, because it really depends on the room that you're playing in, because big rooms, the volume will deliver differently than in small rooms. And I've played in enough different atmospheres with that kind of volume now to where it kind of has a different effect in every single room.
Right.
Like, early on we were playing lots of house shows in really small rooms that weren't built for music. And
like garages and
basements, concrete rooms where there's the sound is going to become a violent experience. It's like I remember playing a show. I remember playing a show in Seattle in a basement, and the entire room was concrete floors and brick walls. And there was a vent behind us from where we were playing. So like the stage was in front of this vent. The vent was behind us.
okay.
And the audience was facing that vent. And they were directly in front of us. And I was in the audience towards the end of the set. And I was on the ground. And I was doing my sort of, I at the time, when we would play the last song on Payment and The Wire, before we recorded it, I was doing this thing where I would just lay in the audience and I would just kind of howl as loud as I could with delay on it, so it'd become this consistent sort of like
circular sound.
Yeah, and it would fluctuate in its volume, you know. It would like kind of fade out and then it'd come back and then it would fade out. And I remember that this room was so small and all the sounds were reflecting off the floors and the walls, so I could hear it coming back and hitting the vent, because the vent would vibrate anytime a bass note would like hit it again. And so from the audience, you could hear this vent just kind of like woo, 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 over and over again. And it became this sort of, I guess, almost psychedelic experience, having this such intense volume.
Yeah.
But on the contrast, we played another show towards the end of Payment that was in a big wooden longhouse, and it sounded just like the album. Very clear. You could make every part of it out. It wasn't just giant walls of sound that were destroying your hearing. And so yeah, the violent volume is only violent depending on the scenario you're in. And sometimes I work to that experience because I think it would be a little counterintuitive of me to say that it isn't a very physical show in some scenarios.
Yeah.
In other scenarios, it's more distant.
Yeah. At least for me, loud, when music is loud, I perform loud, and for example, if you're on a piano and you just continuously hit a couple keys and keep repeating that, and you keep hearing that swell of sound, and the longer it gets and the louder you do it, more overtones and sounds come through with that, even if they're not really there. Is that kind of some, I don't want to say goal, or kind of something you try to do, or something that maybe you did, or maybe try and it kind of formed a different kind of ambition towards something similar to that? Because for me, at least, that's kind of how I do some things.
Yeah, I think acoustics is a specific thing. I don't like using digital instruments. Not because there's anything wrong. I mainly use non-digital equipment just because for one, the overtones are certainly there. That's how sound works. In order for a note to exist, there are several other harmonies within that note that create the note.
Right.
And that's especially true for a piano. And there's sections on a payment where I'm sitting there playing a piano and I'm doing precisely what you're talking about. I'm just holding a chord with both my hands, and I'm letting the foot pedal control the how much it rings out. And so sometimes it'll start off with very staccato, sort of like do 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 do, and then I'll put my foot down on the pedal, and then it'll go do 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 do. And yeah, I think that overtones played a part in payment very well. I don't know if I was satisfied because I didn't layer it enough, but I was running out of money and couldn't afford to keep recording the album.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's a little bare, but yeah, the goal was to create lots of overtones and make it kind of orchestral.
So, kind of with that, how do you approach the difference or ambition with how you would do studio recordings, what you envision studio-wise or just overall in your head, and how you deliver that and deal with that difference between studio approach and live performance? Because at least for me, live performance should be kind of, I don't know, a little different and kind of something else apart from the studio sessions. But how do you kind of, because like you said, you have a lot of dynamics, and you guys certainly have a lot of sound, and it's very big, it's soft at times. How do you kind of differentiate or kind of see what you're going to do studio wise and how you do it live?
A lot of the live experience can't be accomplished in an album, and that has to do with a lot of artists who don't play the kind of music that we do, play more traditional music forms, can accomplish their live performance in an album. And what I mean by that is they can perform their songs and they will come out in a recording exactly the same as they are on the album, because they're structured to be that way, and they're not. Part of the problem is volume. Volume makes it very difficult to record what we do. And the only way we can get solid recordings is in studios that are built to handle that kind of sound. And so because of the fact that we can't accomplish the live show in an album, we often have to approach the direction of we often have to kind of rewrite the songs in a sense for the studio, and that's a creative choice that I make to create diversity within the music, as well as a necessary measure to create music that will work for a studio.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that sense, people will often get two very different packages between what they see and what they purchase. And hopefully that's not a bad thing. But the live shows are often a lot more stark and raw would be the term. Probably more shattering too, just because like when you're at home, most people at home with an album aren't blasting it to the point where it's hurting their ears.
Yeah.
But when you're at our show, you don't have say over the volume, and so you get exactly that at a volume where it's probably hurting your ears a little bit. And so, yeah, the studio experience is a bit more artistic, I would say. The live experience is more brutish. It's just like, watch me destroy my instrument and be a mess. Mm-hmm. Whereas the studio album's like, okay, these people are actually able to be competent musicians.
And so you guys recorded your first album, Payment, at the Unknown in Anacortes, which is very known. You know, there's been some good bands from around here. You know, you guys, Corrine from Mount Vernon, and My Eyes Shut from Woodby, and you know, Phil Elverum and Genevieve. So you guys, your first album was, you know, at a big studio. You recorded it in there.
Mm-hmm.
And now you guys are recording in your own space.
Yeah.
Is it a little more tricky to do that?
Yes, it's much more difficult. None of us are anywhere near as competent as Nick Wilbur is on the recording aspects and the sound aspects. And not only that, we're working in a space that is very small. It's our rehearsal space. It's not a giant wooden room where everything resonates beautifully. It's a small brick wall and plaster where everything's kind of reflecting.
Which is where the Unknown is this, you know, big old church with lots of, you know, heavy acoustics, and there's some natural reverberation in there.
Yeah, any sound you make in Unknown will carry through the whole building, and it will sound haunting and beautiful. Like, just speaking in there, you know, you're hearing the reverb of your voice in the room because it's just so big, it carries through the whole room. And, you know, they've got a lot of equipment, pianos, bells, drums, vocal rooms, organs, vibraphones. And so we had all that stuff at our disposal. And so that made for a more orchestral album than what this will be. Mm-hmm. Because we don't have any of that stuff. Yeah. I have a piano and a cello, but that's about it. And so this album will be quite a bit different from the last one, purely because of the fact that it's not in a professional studio.
Right.
And it's a learning process for us. And hopefully the album will end up sounding at least close to as good as Payment sounds. Because Payment's a professional album. It is an album where you're listening to it and you can compare it to other people who spend a bunch of money on making their music for people, because that's what we did. I put myself into quite a bit of financial hole with that album. It cost me a couple grand to create it. And that's why I'm not repeating that.
And this is kind of a jump from questions, but how important is the local music community? Or I guess the local community within music?
When I was in Contra, I used to always tell everyone that I didn't give a flying fuck about the people around me in the community that were making music, because I wasn't quite as aware of the depths of the music community at the time, and all I saw was college rock bands and stuff that just wasn't interesting at all. But as time's gone on and I've become more older and more intertwined with the community, I found that there's actually a lot of stuff that is important to me, and stuff like Mount Erie or old time religion, beat happening, things of that nature. Hound Dog Taylor's Hand. There's all sorts of just weird outliers in the music community in Washington that kind of don't fit anywhere, and we're kind of in that area where it's kind of like anytime we play with other musicians, it's always weird why we're playing with them.
Yeah.
Like, we've been booked in festivals where we're playing with bands that are on the other hemisphere of music from us, and then people aren't prepared for what we're doing because it's a very intense experience.
Right.
But the music community, I would say, is somewhat important, but at the same time, I don't really want to fit in with it. I think that a lot of bands want to find their place within a community where they're able to tour with bands that they think sound like them and make it easy on themselves. But I kind of prefer to do everything as hard as possible because it makes for a more unique and rewarding experience. And so, yeah, a lot of the bands in Washington tend to fit somewhere into the K Records sort of vibe, where it's kind of there's not really a description for it, I guess. It's just kind of like jangly indie rock that's kind of got a weird, not easy listening edge to it. It's like Beat Happening is kind of the pioneer of that sound, where it's just like, this is like kind of hard to listen to, but it's like childlike and playful.
Definitely.
And I'm just completely hard to listen to. There's no playfulness about it.
But with that, we can kind of start wrapping things up, but do you feel more confident, more focused on what you're doing now?
No. The short answer is no, I don't
Is
feel
it kind of like what I think, and it's a never-ending struggle, that it's kind of like a never-ending ladder that you're climbing up upon?
Well, I think that what I'm doing currently has no direct correlation to the world around me. I wrote all these songs when I was living on a boat in an island where I wasn't in the world. And I kind of had the freedom to just think about things on my terms for once. Whereas Payment was written about a thing that happened against our control and kind of left us with infinite questions and so it made sense to have more confidence in that scenario because you're making music that directly affects the context of things.
Right.
Whereas this isn't like that, and so it leaves you kind of in a position where it's, how do I make this relevant to the rest of the world? So I would overall say I'm less confident writing this album than the first one, but I'm also more confident in terms of lyricism and stage performance.
And it seems like to me that currently you are, I mean, not like you've never been driven by that, but you're a little more headstrong on lyrical things.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of that just has to do with the things I've been listening to and my interest in poetry developing. When I was doing the first album, it had more to do with just conveying a clear message and creating something that was phonetically hypnotic. And so you end up using a lot of short sentences that kind of are all the same to create this hypnotism.
Yeah.
But now I'm writing more in the intention of creating flow and dimension within it, and probably more interpretive lyrics that different people could garner different ideas out of. And so, yeah, the lyrics are the heaviest part to me currently.
I think that's good. To wrap it up, do you have any insight on the release of the new album, which is called The Wallow?
The Wallow is about to be recorded. We have more than half the album nearly completely written. We're going over small details before we start recording. And my goal is to finish the album and release it before the end of the summer. But it could be as late as fall, depending on how recording goes. Yeah, that's about it.